Hi, hello, my name is Ren, and strap in because this is going to be a long video. Because we will be here until I've used up each and every one of these pens and finished at least one sketchbook along the way. This veritable mountain is made up of 100 Ohuhu Dual Tip pens. One side of them has a brush nib, one has a fine liner. And by the end of this video, they will hopefully all be empty, which is good for me because for this year, one of my overarching goals is to use up old supplies from my stash so they don't go bad before I can get my money's worth of art out of them. So I decided to exclusively draw with these pens in my sketchbook every day until they were all gone. This specific set has been haunting my collection for over 5 years by now, and I was a bit worried they might have dried out in that time. So first step for me was to get them in order and then swatch them all in my trusty sketchbook. This also meant I had a nice overview over all the colors at my disposal, as well as a list I could cross pens off of when they would inevitably run out of ink. I ended up using the swatch page a lot during my little adventure just to pick colors, because a lot of these markers didn't match their caps, which, I mean, is pretty common still. And as you might have noticed, the paper in the sketchbook is also a slightly yellowish off-white, so there was an extra bit of color distortion going on anyway, and all this made the color reference really useful. I can only recommend making one for yourself if you ever have a collection of pens this big. These pens, by the way, are all numbered, which was helpful in a way, but also a bit confusing because there isn't really any consistent pattern to those numbers. Two oranges that looked almost identical were the 28 and the 44 respectively, and in between were completely different colors also. No idea how they assigned those, maybe at random. Either way, the standard way for me to test out art supplies is to do some simple studies generally, and that's also what I did here. I kept it simple and monochrome for the first set of little pine martens. I love those little guys, they are so cute, and they are also relatively easy to draw. This is actually also where the first pen already exited the stage. That nice buttery yellow didn't last long at all. It made me think that maybe this whole thing would be over much quicker than I had originally thought, but I think this one was just kind of an outlier. The other ones lasted much longer than that. While I'm working my way through a bunch more studies in the background here, I want to take a moment to talk a bit more about why I embarked on this project. So, sometime last year, I was going through and reorganizing my art supplies and realized that I have a lot of stuff. And a lot of it is stuff I haven't used much at all since I got it, which is not ideal. This isn't a new thing, of course. I have always been very eager to buy something to try it out because it looked interesting or to use for a cool new project idea that I had and never ended up making. This is luckily a habit I have mostly shaken by this point in my life. By now I'm quite good at not buying things I don't have a concrete use for. I have also, with the years and a lot of trial and error, found some sense of what supplies I know I won't enjoy, even without trying them out firsthand, which has cut down on my, I just want to experiment with this purchases for sure. Now, generally speaking, there is nothing wrong with having a lot of supplies or collecting them. You just gotta be aware that some of them will simply stop working eventually, either completely, like some of my inks that just dried out into blocks, or just partially, like paints that change consistency or color and separate a bit over time. And that's something I was not thinking of when I collected stuff throughout my teens and early 20s. I have learned my lesson now after throwing out a number of things that went bad. That was very depressing. Unfortunately, not getting more new stuff isn't enough to make a noticeable dent in my hoard. I also have to actively use the things I already own. If I want to get rid of stuff, I need to use it. Pretty simple. Some stuff I've also given away because I knew I wasn't going to touch it ever again, and, other people have a better time with it. All this to say, these pens are one of those things I bought on impulse and then put away in a drawer because they were just kind of underwhelming. And in order to make sure I don't have to throw them out when they eventually die on me, I decided to just kill them myself, so to speak, metaphorically. Overall, the whole exercise took me about 6 weeks, in which time I was doing very little else drawing-wise besides working with these markers in the sketchbooks, as you'll see. Hello, we're back with a talking interlude. I didn't really record a lot during the past days. I had, let's say, not an ideal time, but I did draw a bit. So let's go over those a bit. I think, last thing I did record was this because it was really interesting to me how well these did with water. Uh, it was crazy, especially the black blended out really well. It turns out I tried a bunch of different oranges down there and not all of them blended out, but that was really fun. I ended up not really doing anything with this after playing around a bit with the blending in this one because it turns out the problem with using water in a sketchbook is that it takes forever to dry, and the beauty of pens compared to paints, basically, why would you use a brush pen instead of just a brush and watercolor, for example, is that it dries fast, right? So yes, I could dilute these with water and have a fun effect, but also that would take forever. And that's not what I want in my sketchbook. The point of the sketchbook is that things are done quickly. So yeah. You can also see I kind of gave up. I feel like at the beginning here especially I tried to do interesting things with the colors, but it does not work for me. I have a very basic way I approach layering color in my sketchbooks. This color combination of a yellow, a pink, and a purple. I've done this earlier in my sketchbook too. I like doing this for studies because you have a light, you have a mid, and you have a dark, and I know these colors work together. Same with here where it's okay, there's a light yellow for the background, we have a pink, and then we have a dark blue. Kind of the same color combination. And at first, again, I tried layering them a bit differently because I was like, oh, you need to experiment, you need to do something interesting. But I didn't enjoy that a lot. It put a lot of pressure on the stuff I was doing. I felt like, oh, I have to make something nice. Oh, I have to work extra hard, so I gave up on that. And I just went back to my classic standard way of doing studies. Some were lizards. You probably don't know this, but well, you might know this. I always forget what I've already said, but I love dragons, but I'm really bad at drawing them, so last year a goal of mine was to get better at drawing dragons, which I guess I did practice a little bit, so maybe I did get a bit better, but not as much as I hoped. So this year I have the same goal, so I'm returning to looking at real life lizards so I can draw fake, much cooler lizards later on. And then I also noticed that I have not been drawing super much lately, so I am extremely out of practice and stiff all the time, so I just did a bunch of post-studies, first in green, then in blue. Again, these are really simple, blocking in the shape and then going over it with a darker color. This is also a great point to talk about. I did the same thing with cats later. A great moment to talk about these pens. I think I've said before that I mostly just bought them because they were cheap, and I had a moment of extreme weakness. And if you are thinking about getting them just because it's like, oh, it's a variety and they're brush pens, that seems fun, don't do it. They're not good. I would say the selling point of a brush pen, why you would want to use a brush pen instead of a different sort of pen, is, you can see this here, but the fact that you can get a strong variety of marks from it. You can fill both a large area, but you can also do like thin, delicate lines with it. And that's great. I love brush pens. That's also why I love brushes. You have this, like, I know I tested some earlier in here. Where is it? Here. Like this kind, you can fill a large space, but you can also have thinner lines. These are fiber brush pens, so they are kind of like a brush in the same way that there's singular hairs, not a big sponge that is cut to resemble the shape of a brush nib. So they do get a bit thinner, but this variation is what you're looking for. And these pens provide that until you use them the first time to fill in a large area. It's actually crazy how badly they fray from simple use. When I got out the black pen, this was a dark green, so when I got the black pen out for these, I was like, wow, I can, like, this has a lot of structure and quality compared to the ones I'd been using a lot to block and other stuff. And I was like, wow, that's really nice. But then after using it for a bit, I was like, okay, it also frayed now. Now it's also just very soft and doesn't hold its shape very well anymore, which feels crazy. And I know I am spoiled in this regard because some of the first brush markers I used a lot were Copic markers, but the fact that they are just so good. They hold their shape, they last forever. Like, they are expensive, I understand this, and this is no real comparison. Like, a Copic marker, even the smaller ones, go for like 3 to 4 euros a piece, and all of these were like cheaper than €1 a piece, probably like 50 cents a piece in the set that they came in. So it's not a fair comparison, but it does show that, you can have better ones, and I would really prefer those, because at this point it's like, well, at this point I'd rather they have a chisel tip than a brush tip, because at least that one frays less, and eventually you do kind of still have an edge to make thin lines with, even if it frays a bit. But no, all of this to say, I would not recommend them even if they come cheap, because beside all these problems, there's also the benefit of a large set is that you get a variety of colors, right? But these are not a big variety. These are all midtones, almost. Like, look at these. Even the very light gray is not so light. There are very few very light colors, but most of them are some level of midtone, and then you also don't really have any genuinely dark colors. It's so frustrating if you want to make art with them. It's genuinely, I get every time I'm looking for colors, I get so pissed. And also, if you use the light colors a lot, like I do to block in like a shape, to then draw over with a darker color, they also die really quickly. Like there's already like 2 or 3 that I've used for blocking in colors. Like I did some basically figure drawing for cats by just blocking in their shapes. And this pen lasted for this page. I didn't really use it anywhere else. And lasted for 6 more on this page. And this is a different pen, which you can barely tell because it looks almost exactly the same. There's several pens in here that just are basically the same, at which point you go, okay, why are they both in this set? Why do both of these colors exist? They basically do not look different. There's not a point. Now that I've complained about the pens enough, I mean, yeah, simple, these are studies. This is a character design for humanoid Whooper, the Pokemon. I love this guy. I made a video like forever ago about designing him, and I do not love that design. I basically just went with one of my first ideas, which is a terrible habit. Like if you're doing character design, the fun part is iterating and looking if you can come up with more new interesting stuff. So I wanted to tweak that design a little bit to make it more interesting. And then, as I said, I did some cat studies because I love cats, but just as much as I love dragons, I'm also really bad at drawing cats, so I need the work. Then I did some more studies of human poses. These are all from photos as well. And then I did more cats because I need the practice. And then, because I was still thinking about character designs, I was playing around with like designing some outfits for Cynthia, the champion, the Pokemon character. So I was looking at some designs for her, and then I just played with some designs. Again, did the base with a yellow, and the yellow, you can probably not see that super well, but that thing's already dying, and again, I didn't use it that much, so that's great. But yeah, I'm not closing this. What am I doing? I am gonna draw some more now with these pens that are kind of disappointing, and we're gonna start with some more cats because I love cats, and also it's a good warm-up, and I have not drawn at all today, so that should be a fun, quick thing to do. Despite them not being my favorite markers overall, I did get used to how they worked and kind of made my peace with it eventually. Somewhere around here is also where my original deadline came and went. I buried the lead on that a bit earlier, but when I started this, it was meant to just be me playing with these pens for a month and then moving on to the next thing. But you know, plans change. Either way, while I didn't love the pens themselves, I got used to working with them, and frankly, I'm not that picky about my supplies. I can have fun even with subpar materials as long as I'm drawing something I'm invested in. And well, it started a bit earlier, but I was deep in another one of my Pokemon phases at this point. I actually started replaying Pokemon Platinum earlier this year, and maybe it was the nostalgia or the fact that I designed a fun character for me to play as this time around. I haven't done that before, but I got extremely invested this time, which for me means that not only was I drawing them, my character, their name is James, by the way, and their Pokemon a bunch, but I also started writing down a lot of notes on their story and some world building ideas for my own kind of AU Pokemon verse. I was having a blast. These rare moments where I get super inspired are some of my favorite times for drawing, really. You just gotta take your motivation wherever you can get it. And if the art supply you're using just kind of sucks, it has to be balanced out by something else. This was also when I was slowly and carefully approaching the concept of layering these pens in unusual ways again after that failure near the start. Maybe I just needed to work up the courage by getting more used to the pens overall, or maybe this was when I just started losing some more colors and I was forced into it. I don't know. It's also possible that I just got bored of drawing the same basic way over and over again, or it was a combination of all three. The important thing is that I finally started doing more interesting things, which ultimately ended with me even going out of my comfort zone, subject-wise, and drawing some landscapes. Who could have seen that coming? Not me, certainly. So this is kind of the point where I changed my mind a bit on what I was even gonna do with this project. At first, it was just, the plan was to go through my old art supplies, use pens I had but had never really used all that much, and that was fine. But eventually, like you can see here, right, I had the experience that if I used any of the pens for an extended time, they would just dry out extremely quickly. There just wasn't that much ink in them. So at that point, I was like, you know what? I don't like these pens all that much, so I might as well try to use up as many of them, ideally the whole 100 of them, while I do this, so that I don't have them hanging over me anymore. Now, that was when I realized, well, if I want to use them up, I can't, do work like, what's a good page? Like this anymore, where I barely use ink and mostly just do a bit of lines and then some. I need to really fill in the page, and that's why I decided to do some very stylized environmental studies, and I love these. I'm really, really proud of how these came out. But that was why I started doing this. I was like, I need to fill in more of the page. I need to layer these pens more if I want to finish them off. And it did work. Like, I did these over 2 days, and I finished all of these. All of these are empty now, which is nice in some way, but I still have like 60 pens or something left, and this sketchbook only has 3 spreads left. So yeah, this is like the end page. So the question is, can I finish my leftover pens? Which it's still a good range of color. Can I finish these in time with the sketchbook, or will I have to carry them on to the next sketchbook? And the hope is that I will finish these, and in the same vein of thought where I was like, okay, I just need to fill in more space to use up more of them, I went back all the way to where I started with these. Yeah. And started filling in some backgrounds, which also led to, you can see these drying out so quick. It works well for like the first bit, and then they get really spotty, and that is extremely annoying to draw with. It feels like, oh well, there's still enough ink in there to draw a bit, but not really nicely, which is extremely annoying to work with. I left these out because I was not gonna look for the references here. I fucked up and used a pen that was a bit too dark at first. And then I had used up all the bright ones, and I had to use darker ones to fill in the backgrounds. Like here, I wish I had like a lighter one, but I don't. I still have like 2 light-ish blues, but I kind of want to use them for more environmental studies. We'll see how long those last anyway. But yeah. I also wanted to use a bright one for the background on these, but I just don't have bright ones left. I'm basically down to just midtones and some darks, and that's it. There's still a good hue variation, but that was never the problem with this set, right? Like, the problem is that there is no range in how light or dark these colors are. I think in the whole set of 100 pens, there's like 5 or 6 light ones, and the rest are like midtones, and then there's 5 really dark ones. Oh, this page. I went over this page heavily because I fucking hated it. I still don't like it, but I hate it less than I did before, so I'm going to count that as a win. This is also, I wish I had a yellow still, but I've used up basically all my yellows already, and because they're the brightest colors as the base for most of my drawings, so yeah. It was also had to resort to a dark one for filling in some background elements. But yeah, it is almost done, the sketchbook. Ideally also the pens, but I kind of don't believe that. So yeah, I am kind of hoping it'll get done, but yeah, I have my doubts. This still doesn't look like 60 pens to me, but it is. I counted them more than once, so it's like 64 or something left. I have made a good dent into them, and I think a lot of these are probably almost empty because I have used them before, just not enough for them to be done, but we shall see. We shall see. These pages I'm working on now turned out to be my favorite ones, which is probably not unrelated to the fact that I spent much more time on them than I usually do with my sketchbook pages. Just for context, each of these landscapes took me about 20 to 30 minutes, and it's unusual for me to spend more than 40 minutes on a spread, typically. Turns out making an effort is worth it sometimes. Who could have known? But now that some time has passed, let's talk about that little crisis I mentioned earlier. I eventually, as I said, got used to all the little quirks and problems of these markers, so the crisis wasn't really about the art supply directly. The real challenge came to my mindset in approaching art supplies generally, and I don't think I've really managed to work it through fully, but let's talk about it anyway. At its core, it's about high quality, more expensive supplies versus lower quality, cheaper supplies. I am and have for a long time been an advocate for good quality supplies, even if they are more expensive. This is all, of course, under the caveat that you can afford them. This is not because I think cheaper supplies are bad or that I feel like I'm above them or whatever. It's just that basically every time I have gone out and grabbed the cheap knockoff version of something, I struggled so much that it made me not want to make art at all, or not make art with those supplies, which meant that basically I had wasted my money in the end anyway. And at that point, I would have been better off just getting something more expensive but higher quality. And when I say expensive, I don't mean just going by price, I mean higher quality supply, because often there is only a small difference between things that are in the mid-price range compared to the very expensive stuff, but a huge, huge difference between the lower end of this price spectrum and the mid-range. And this is because ultimately, yes, to a degree, better quality pigments, binders, basic materials are just more expensive, and that will make any given supply more expensive. But also, you don't need to just run after an expensive brand name because sometimes the name is adding a lot of money to the price, which doesn't add any to the quality, right? On top of that, I have in my own art journey noticed that it has basically always been more instructive to me to have a limited amount of a color of paints or a limited selection of pens or of any supply, because if you spend a similar amount on just like 10 mid-range quality paint tubes instead of the same amount of money for a set of 40 or 50, it allows you to actually become familiar with the ways the supply interacts with itself and also other things, which then makes you consider more unusual ways to combine them because, well, you don't have this unlimited amount of options to choose from. You have to actually make an effort to mix colors, and that will inevitably teach you about mixing. A giant set of cheap stuff just doesn't incentivize learning and experimentation in the same way. Now, a lot of my own convictions were upheld by the use of this set. Overall, they were very underwhelming, and I was comparing them a lot to my Tombow brush pens while I was using them mentally. It was easier to make things when I had most of the pens and I only really learned something I didn't know before when I was forced to start layering them in ways I didn't originally want to, or when I started running out of colors. The limitations in the later half of this project were in fact helpful, and they were what really got me to improve, at least in my opinion. Using these pens in the same way I would draw with other supplies was just kind of annoying because I wished they were the better supplies I had the entire time. And that thought was where I mostly left off after I finished the project, but now in the aftermath, there has been a growing question in the back of my mind. Because here's the thing. It is without question very relevant that these were low quality pens and that I wanted them gone. Not only was them running out of ink not a problem, it was the explicit goal. And the way I used them was a result of that mindset. I wouldn't have layered them so heavily or perhaps even done environment studies like those at all if I was working with other markers. I have a small collection, as I mentioned, of Tombow brush markers I could use for something similar, though to be honest, I mostly have them for my bullet journal purposes and not for drawing. But I don't know if I could make myself do studies in the same way with those without thinking at every moment that I am using up pens that cost me quite a bit and that I would not be very happy to have to replace once they're dry, even though I can. The lack of stakes and worry, the freedom to explore whatever, had a huge impact on how I worked with these. Because with supplies I actually liked, not only would I worry about the supply themselves, but I would also worry more about the results. It feels a lot worse to have made an effort and used something nice, and then see that what you have made with it is bad. Which means that not caring much about the results because of the supply quality was an integral part of me learning anything here. Which opens the question, would I actually improve more if I focused on practicing and working with art supplies I don't like? And that feels like an insane question to ask, but the thing is, it might be true. I have noticed I make the most art and the most experimental, low-stress art when I'm using things I want gone. It happened with the ink sketchbook last year, and then happened with blocks of watercolor paper and old paints several times over the years. I get a real feeling of accomplishment when I can get rid of something in a quote-unquote productive way, using something up and being able to say, hey, I didn't waste this even if I didn't like it, feels great to me. It makes me happy. And the positive reinforcement of that makes me want to draw more, to make more stuff. I don't get the same high from using up things I like, despite the fact that now, as an adult, I am for the most part able to replace whatever supplies I use up without a problem. Even the ones on the more expensive side, I still get anxiety around using the good stuff, because I don't want to waste it, which is very silly. Practice is not a waste, it is necessary. Making bad art is not a waste. It is an inevitable part of every drawing process. And while some skills can carry over, if you want to make nice finished pieces with your good supplies, you have to get a feel for them, and that means you have to actually use them. You have to practice with them. And let's not forget also, because they are of higher quality, they are easier and more pleasant to work with. And having a good time while making art is also important to me. I don't want to struggle all the time, but I also don't want to constantly be anxious about using the good stuff. So if I can't get over that mental hurdle of, oh, too nice means I can't use it for important work. Would I actually be better off getting cheap supplies I know I won't like? Is this where it leads me? The thing is, though, I can't do that, right? I can't really advocate for something like that. It feels deranged to consider buying something with money that I know I won't like just because it might potentially make me draw more. Spending money purposefully to get something I know sucks. I don't want to do that. Do I need to perpetually suffer just to improve? That cannot be right. I refuse to draw this conclusion out of this whole thing. So, if I'm unwilling to do that, which I think is the correct decision, I guess I am better off working through whatever mental hang-ups I have around using more expensive stuff, even for non-serious, very silly, very bad art. But, you know, those things, just because you decide you want to get over it, doesn't just happen. These things take time. And, I mean, lucky for me right now, I have that time. Because, as I've mentioned, I am still sitting on somewhat of a hoard of supplies, many of which are of nicer quality, but many of them I am not really that attached to anymore. One thing that really helps me not worry about the original price of something is having had it in my drawers for a long time. At this point, the emotional reaction to the price has flattened, and the hypothetical euphoria of having used up something from my stash becomes much stronger. So I can only hope that by the time I'm done working my way through a chunk of my collection, I'll have made some progress with my own hang-ups. Because frankly, the last thing I want to train myself to do is to buy cheap shit in bulk when I don't really even need it. Hilariously, I have caught myself, while working on this video, I have caught myself looking up the current price of the Ohuhu marker set I used in this video, and had to mentally spray myself with a cold water bottle because I had considered buying it. Insanity. I do not want to use them again. Why am I like this? It is so easy to say that I need to stop buying things I don't need and don't really want, but I am not immune to pretty packaging and huge collections of stuff coupled with a low price. I am still tempted, but at least at this point, I am not buying stuff like that anymore. So I hope that if I just kick this can down the road long enough, that eventually I will be over my weird anxiety around using my good things, which I like and I bought because I want to use them. It's just gonna take some time. Unfortunately, just with improving anything in your life, any of your skills, it'll just take time. It'll just take time. As you can see here, I didn't manage to confine this little saga to one sketchbook, and I had to break out the next one as well. Maybe it was the landscape format or just the fact that the landscapes previously had been so reliable in soaking up ink. I just kept drawing more of them. This time, I even went through the effort of masking of the edges of the drawings to make it look much nicer. It's funny that every time I start a new sketchbook, I tend to make an effort for the first few pages because I'm convinced that this time around, I'll definitely make the whole thing aesthetic and beautiful. And every time I give up on that a few pages in because unfortunately, I'm just not built like that. I don't use sketchbooks like that. I will probably never have an aesthetic one because I am just too messy and all over the place. Either way, I kept going with the landscapes, and while the recordings may make it look relatively smooth going, I did actually struggle quite a bit with a few of them, especially near the end here. Oh no, it's getting interesting. No! The real problem is that these are all dead. You know what's a great choice when you're running out of colors? Do something like this. It'll definitely work, and it'll definitely not look like shit. At least this guy's still alive. I shouldn't have said that. No! I shouldn't have said that. Do not die on me. I need you. God, no! You cannot be doing this to me. Okay. Big mistake. No, we're out of purple. We still have some pinks, but we're out of purple and our blues are getting short also. I'm so fucked. Saying this enemy using one that seems to not. Girl, I cannot. We cannot be doing this. I'm running out of pens. Okay, great. You are kidding. Everyone? Every single one? Why did I do this? I'm running out of pens. Well, not directly. I still have like 30 left. Oh, wait. Let's count. Okay, we have 26 pens left, and most of these colors do not fit this scene. My blues are staggeringly gone. This is like greenish, but it's good enough, I guess. Yeah, we were doing greenish blue anyway. I mean, really, I was doing greenish blue because I meant to go over it with pinks as to make it purple. But we see how well that worked in the background, so I'm considering just going over with like a dark reddish one I still have. But I frankly also don't know how much this one still has in it. Like, what if it also dies on me immediately? What then? Okay, this is not great. This is also feeling a lot like it's running out of ink. No. Okay, this was a terrible idea. I should have picked like a light scene where I didn't need a lot of ink in these pens. Genuinely, this looks awful. I wanted this to look nice, and it's not looking nice at all. So I think I'm just gonna let it dry for a second. Then I'm gonna come back and hurt myself some more. Okay, this one seems nice. This also feels kind of empty right now. I'm not gonna lie. Why is my life like this? Why are these pens like this? I think this page might just be like a legitimate failure. I think I might just have to give up. Well, it was worth a try. this has used a lot of pens, so at least we have made progress on the road to finishing up the set. Now we are down to, I think, 25, was it? 24. We're down to 24. I bet this blue is also about to die. So I have one blue, I have some greens. Like this is the current situation. Alright, let me show you. There's a lot of come back. So I have one gray, I have one blue, I have some oranges, a number of browns, and some greens. So I guess I can try another green landscape, but I'm kind of also expecting the greens to die basically immediately on me after using them on a few pages where they didn't really do, like where they came out unscathed, basically. Let's see if I can make one last landscape work, and then I'll see what I have left. I'm done. I just, I guess, wasted the last bit of ink of these on my beautiful swatch sheet. But they were almost done. I had barely any colors left. I had like a bunch of greens, like 3, and some browns, this one pink, and yeah. I decided, you know what, I'm not even gonna try to go for a landscape, and I don't want to record it. I was just doodling a portrait because that's something I feel relatively secure in. And yeah, I don't love how this looks right now. I am debating going over it with some acrylic markers, but yeah, I am. It feels great to be done with something. I'm definitely gonna add in some highlights to the eyes. I can just do that right now. But before that, I wanna mark off the last few colors I had left, which is this 48. Wait. It's It's the 48. It is... Where are you? Somewhere over here. Oh yeah. It's the 7. It is the 66. And... Is that all? No, there should be another brown that I haven't crossed off. Oh no, there's the gray, right? There's the gray, which is the 18. Yes, none of these color codes really make sense. I've mentioned this before. But yeah, all of them crossed off. All of them empty now. And I can live in peace, knowing I have actually used the fuck out of these pens. So that makes me happy. But yeah, this is where we end this beautiful project. I am very happy I'm done with it now. I don't recommend these pens, and I'm glad I don't have to use them anymore. I can now do something else. That's it. I am free.